This story is titled, "My Golden Brother Cheated with My Wife, Tried to Drain My Savings, and My Mom Sided with Them, so I Did This and Destroyed Their Lives." Hey everyone, long-time lurker but first-time poster here. I've always considered myself someone who's got it together, but lately everything feels like it's spiraling out of control. My marriage, my family, even my judgment. It's all starting to feel shaky. It's like I've been thrust into some twisted soap opera I never signed up for. Let me lay it all out and see if I'm the one losing it. Here's the situation. I'm 28 and married to Claire, who's 27. We've been married for 2 years, and I thought we had a good thing going. I'm not someone who expects a picture-perfect romance, but I've worked hard to build a stable life, a solid career, a nice home, and a plan for the future. Claire fit perfectly into that vision. She's sharp, funny, and clever enough to keep me on my toes. We worked well together, like a real partnership. I never imagined I'd have to question her. She wasn't just my wife, she was my teammate in every sense. I still remember how she stood by me after I missed out on a promotion I was working hard for. "You'll get the next one," she said, placing her hand on mine. "You're unstoppable." I believed her back then. Now I don't even know who she is anymore. And then there's James, my younger brother, also 27. He's the textbook definition of charm. Growing up, James was everyone's favorite. Teachers, girlfriends, even our parents. Everyone adored him, and he knew how to use that to his advantage. It was always James this, James that. Meanwhile, I was the one grinding away, earning everything through hard work. Am I bitter? Okay, maybe a little. That said, James and I were inseparable when we were kids. He wasn't just my brother, he was my best friend. We spent summers building forts, taking the blame for each other's messes, and shielding one another from the world. Sure, he was the golden child and Mom and Dad's favorite, but back then, it didn't matter. We had each other. That's why this betrayal cuts so deep. When Claire and I got married, James hit it off with her immediately. It didn't bother me at first. Family is family. He'd come around, crack jokes, and be his usual entertaining self. I figured Claire just saw him as my fun, carefree brother. She's way too smart to fall for his smooth-talking nonsense. And James wouldn't dare mess with my life, or so I thought. But then James started coming around more. And not just for the usual family dinners or weekend beers. I'm talking about midweek drop-ins when I wasn't home. I'd get back from work and Claire would casually say, "Oh, James stopped by for lunch." At first, I brushed it off. Cool, I guess, I thought. But then it started happening too often. One evening, I came home early and found them sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. When Claire saw me, she quickly locked her screen, and her smile vanished. My gut churned. I didn't say anything. I had no proof, but the way she avoided eye contact lingered in my mind. Later that night, I tried to keep things casual. "So, what was so funny earlier with James?" I asked. I let it go, but alarm bells were ringing in my head. Something felt off. The next day, over dinner, I decided to test the waters. "James has been hanging around a lot lately," I said lightly. "Doesn't he have better things to do?" Claire rolled her eyes and laughed. "He's your brother, don't be so dramatic. He just likes hanging out." Looking back, I can see the signs I missed. Claire had been restless lately, saying she wanted more out of life and feeling trapped. I thought I was doing enough, but maybe I wasn't. Maybe James filled some void she thought she had. Not that it justifies their actions, it just makes me question everything. That night, I called my best friend Eric, someone I've trusted since college. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. "You're overthinking it," Eric said at first, his voice calm and reassuring. "James can be annoying, sure, but he's your brother. Claire's too smart to cross that line. I don't know, man, I replied. Something about their behavior feels too familiar. Eric paused, then sighed. Okay, let's say you're not imagining it. What are you planning to do if it's true? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But if I find out they're betraying me, they're both out of my life. Good, Eric said firmly. You don't deserve that kind of betrayal. Keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, trust your instincts. Then came the family barbecue. It seemed like an innocent get-together, just burgers and laughs in the backyard. Or so I thought. One of my cousins made a joke. Man, Claire and James are like two peas in a pod. Everyone laughed, but my jaw tightened. It wasn't just me noticing it anymore. Others saw it too. That's when I realized this wasn't just in my head. Since then, I've been watching, not obsessively, but carefully. I'm not some insecure guy who needs to monitor his wife's every move, but I'm not blind either. The subtle glances they share, the inside jokes I'm left out of, the way Claire always defends James when I bring up my concerns. It's all adding up. For now, I've been letting them think I'm oblivious, playing the long game. But deep down, I know this isn't going to end well. And if they think I'll just sit back and let this slide, they've got another thing coming. At this point, I knew I needed backup. I didn't just want to catch them. I wanted to be prepared for every angle. That's when I called Mark, a family friend who also happens to be a top-notch family lawyer. Mark isn't just any attorney. He's a shark in a suit who's seen it all. I knew he'd have my back. Something feels wrong, I told Mark as I shared my suspicions. Admitting that I thought my brother and wife might be betraying me wasn't easy. It stung like hell, but I needed help and refused to stoop to underhanded tactics. I don't have much to go on yet, but my gut tells me they're hiding something, I said. Mark didn't ask for details. He's not one to waste time on conjecture. Get me the proof, he said, his tone unwavering. Then we'll figure out the next steps. Let me make one thing clear. I'm not the kind of person who tolerates disrespect. Call it old-fashioned if you want, but loyalty is the one boundary you don't cross. Ever. So, when Claire and James started acting suspicious, I didn't sit back and hope for the best. I'm not the kind to wait for the storm to pass. I walked straight into it. And this storm had been building for far too long. The opportunity to act came when I told Claire I had a business trip out of town. At least, that's what I let her believe. I packed my bag and told her I'd be away for 3 days. But instead of heading to the airport, I checked into a hotel on the other side of town. This wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. If something was going on, I needed hard evidence. Speculation means nothing. Proof is everything. The first day passed quietly. Claire texted me regularly, keeping up the pretense that everything was normal. "Miss you," one message read. "Hope work's not too stressful?" I almost laughed. She was good, very convincing. But I've learned that even the best liars slip up eventually. By the second day, my instincts proved right. Around midday, I received an alert from the tracking app I'd discreetly installed on Claire's phone. Yes, I know how that sounds, but when the stakes are this high, you don't leave anything to chance. She wasn't at home. She wasn't at the grocery store or anywhere she'd usually go. She was at James's apartment. In that moment, I didn't feel anger, at least not in the way you'd expect. What I felt was cold, sharp focus. Gripping the steering wheel, I waited, watching the building. Not because I needed more proof, but because I had to see how far this would go. If Claire and James were crossing a line, I wasn't going to let them pretend otherwise. An hour later, they walked out together. Claire's laughter rang down the street as they made their way to James's car. She looked carefree, as though she didn't have a single worry in the world. James, meanwhile, was grinning like he owned the place. Ah, my wife. My brother. They genuinely thought they'd gotten away with it. I followed them to a nearby coffee shop, parking across the street. Through the window, I watched as they sat close, engrossed in their conversation. It wasn't innocent. At one point, Claire's hand brushed James's arm, and my chest tightened, not from hurt, but from the sheer realization of their audacity. They thought they could disrespect me and get away with it. Quietly, I opened my camera app and started snapping pictures. Each click felt like another nail in the coffin of their lies. But something about this situation didn't add up. It wasn't just the sneaking around. It was the small cash withdrawals Claire had been making from our accounts over the last few months. At first, I thought it was just her usual spending, but the pattern seemed deliberate. 2 days later, Mark confirmed my suspicions. The money's been going into an account that doesn't belong to either of them, he told me over the phone. Whose account is it? I asked, my voice tense. It's under the name Victor Kane, Mark said grimly. Who the hell is Victor Kane? Is trouble, Mark explained. A known con artist flagged for multiple fraudulent investment schemes. No convictions yet, but he's scammed people out of thousands. It looks like he's roped James into one of his cons, and your wife, whether she realizes it or not, has been funding it. My stomach turned. This wasn't just an affair anymore. James and Claire weren't just betraying me. They were being played themselves. Worse, my money was now tangled up in whatever scam Victor Kane was running. I had a lot to process, but I knew I had to stay focused and handle things one step at a time. The next day, I came home earlier than expected. Claire was at the kitchen counter, sipping her coffee with her phone in hand. When she saw me, she froze for half a second before forcing a smile. You're back early. How was the trip? I dropped my bag by the door, leaning against the wall with my arms crossed. Cut short, I said casually. Thought I'd surprise you. She laughed, but there was an edge to it. Well, that's great. I didn't say much. I wanted her to sit in the silence, to feel the weight of it. Claire doesn't handle silence well. It makes her anxious. Sure enough, she started rambling about her day, trying to fill the void. I stayed calm and steady, watching her. Then I made my move. Her spoon paused midair. Fine, I guess. Why? No reason, I said, leaning back in my chair. Just seems like you two have been spending a lot of time together. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you really doing this again? He's your brother. Yeah, I said, my voice calm. My brother. Funny how that works. Her jaw tightened. You're being paranoid. You've been working too much. Maybe you need a break. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Maybe I do. She didn't see it coming when I slid my phone across the table. The photos were right there, her and James at the coffee shop, laughing, leaning in far too close. The blood drained from her face. It's not what it looks like, she stammered. Classic, predictable. I tilted my head. So, what is it then? Because it sure looks like my wife and my brother sneaking around behind my back. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, just tears. Big, dramatic ones, meant to sway me, but I wasn't moved, not anymore. Save it, I said, my voice low and steady. I gave you the benefit of the doubt for weeks. I trusted you, and this is how you repay me. Nothing happened, she cried. We were just talking. Her denials rang hollow. She knew she was caught. As I drove away, something shifted inside me. The old version of myself. The one who trusted too easily, who believed in loyalty without question, was gone. What replaced him was sharper, harder. If Claire and James thought this was over, they were dead wrong. I didn't pack my things and leave the house just to sulk. I left because I needed space to strategize my next move. I'm not the kind of guy who lets emotions take control. Every decision I made after walking out was intentional and thought through. They believed they'd won, that I'd give up and move on. But I've never backed down from a fight, and I wasn't about to start now. The day after I left, I presented everything to Mark. The photos, the tracking logs, and the way Claire couldn't even meet my eyes when I confronted her. Mark is the type of guy who thrives on tearing people apart in court, and the satisfied grin on his face as he looked through the evidence told me I'd chosen the right ally. "This isn't just an affair," Mark said, flipping through the photos. "It's premeditated." He was spot on. The secrecy, the lies, it wasn't just infidelity, it was a coordinated plan. When Mark suggested digging deeper, I didn't hesitate. If there was more to uncover, I wanted to know all of it. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about cheating. James had always been envious of my job, my house, my life. He used to joke about it, but now I wondered if those jokes had a deeper meaning. As for Claire, she'd mentioned feeling stuck once or twice, but I brushed it off. Maybe I should have paid more attention. Or maybe it didn't matter. Maybe this was simply who they were, two people willing to destroy someone else's life to get what they wanted. While Mark got to work, I shifted my focus to James. Claire's betrayal hurt. But James, my brother, cut me to the core. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about the audacity of thinking he could take what I'd worked so hard to build. This was theft, plain and simple. 2 days later, Mark called with a breakthrough. "There are financial discrepancies in your joint accounts," he said. "Claire has been withdrawing money, small amounts at first, but then larger sums. I tracked the transfers to a hidden account." "It's under James's name," Mark replied. Then, after a pause, he added, "And that's not the worst of it. There's a string of messages between him and Claire discussing how to clean you out completely." The words hit me like a freight train. But instead of shock, all I felt was pure, cold fury. They weren't just sneaking around behind my back. They were plotting to leave me with nothing. My wife, my brother. They wanted to destroy everything I'd built so they could play house while I was left picking up the pieces. Sleep became a rare luxury, and the exhaustion started showing at work. My boss noticed and pulled me aside after a meeting. "You've been distracted lately," he said. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell him everything, that my wife and brother were dismantling my life, that my finances were in shambles, but instead I nodded and assured him I'd get back on track. Work was all I had left, and even that felt like it was slipping away. My friends noticed too. One of them texted, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I didn't reply. Confronting Claire again wasn't an option. She'd made her choice and there was no coming back from that. But James, he hadn't faced me yet. He hadn't felt the consequences. Before going to see him, I dug deeper. Mark sent me a report on Victor Kane, the man James had gotten involved with. Victor preyed on people like James, those desperate for quick cash and too arrogant to spot the red flags. According to Mark, Victor had promised James an easy deal. Secure access to a large sum of money, invest it in one of Victor's ventures, and double it within months. All James had to do was convince someone to bankroll him. And that's where Claire came in. I didn't care if James manipulated Claire or if she went along willingly. They had both betrayed me, and now they were tangled in a scam that could destroy everything I'd worked for. Before confronting James, I stopped by Eric's place. "You really gonna confront him?" Eric asked. "I have to," I said, my jaw clenched. Just don't lose your cool, he warned. You're better than this. Don't let their betrayal define you. The next evening, I drove to James's apartment. I didn't call ahead. I didn't knock softly. I pounded on the door until he opened it, his face turning pale when he saw me. "Can we talk?" he stammered, already trying to backpedal. I stepped inside, slamming the door behind me. "You've got one chance," I said, my tone icy. "Tell me the truth, now." James's face drained of color. "Man, it's not what you think." "Don't lie to me." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "I have photos, tracking logs, bank statements. You think I don't know about the hidden account?" James froze, his hands trembling. I stepped closer, towering over him. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You didn't just sleep with my wife, you tried to take everything I've built. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I'd just let it go?" James raised his hands defensively, his voice shaking. It wasn't my idea. Claire, she..." "Don't," I growled, cutting him off. "Don't you dare pin this on her like you're innocent. You were in on it every step of the way." He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't let him. Reaching into my jacket, I pulled out a copy of the bank statements Mark had uncovered and tossed them onto the coffee table. "See that? That's your name. That's you stealing from me, planning to leave me with nothing. You're not just a liar, James, you're a thief." His voice faltered as he tried to defend himself, but I leaned in closer, my tone low and unyielding. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "I know about the account. I know about the money. Victor's not your business partner. He's a con artist. And you're just another pawn in his game." James's hands shook. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he admitted. "Victor said it was a safe investment. Claire thought it was a good idea too. You brought him into our lives." I snapped. "You dragged her into this. And now you're going to tell me everything, or I'll make sure Victor knows you've turned on him." James's eyes widened with genuine fear. "You don't know what he's capable of," he whispered. "That's not my problem," I replied coldly. "You made this mess. Now clean it up." I left him in chaos. 2 days later, my mom called me. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "James is your brother. Families fight, but we forgive. He's going through a rough time," she insisted, ignoring my words. "He didn't mean for things to go this far." "Don't call me about this again," I said, hanging up before she could respond. Walking out of James's apartment wasn't the end. It was just the start of the fallout. Betrayals like this don't fade. They leave scars that run deep. The first thing I did was secure every loose financial end. If they thought they were clever, they had no idea who they were up against. With Mark by my side, I wasn't about to let either of them walk away with a dime of what I'd earned. I locked down our joint accounts. Claire had been quietly siphoning money for months, and Mark had tracked every withdrawal, hidden account, and suspicious transfer. But just as I started feeling in control, another problem landed in my lap. My boss called me into his office. "Your numbers are slipping," he said. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth, but what could I say? That my wife and brother were conspiring against me? That my personal life was falling apart? Instead, I nodded and promised to focus. The last thing I needed was their betrayal ruining my career, too. To stay ahead, I transferred everything into secure accounts under my name alone. No ties to Claire, no access for her to drain another penny. By the time she and James realized what I'd done, they were completely cut off. No money, no access, no idea how to undo it. Then came the next step. Divorce papers. Mark didn't just draft a basic set of documents. He built an airtight case. With evidence of her affair and her attempt to steal from me, Claire had no leverage. She couldn't hope for a single cent beyond what the law required, which, as far as I was concerned, was nothing. When the papers hit her doorstep, she called me immediately. Her voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "You're divorcing me?" she snapped, like I was the one betraying her. "You can't just throw everything away like this." I almost laughed at her audacity. "Throw everything away?" I said. "Claire, you did that the moment you started sneaking around with James. You did that when you decided to take what wasn't yours. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made." She tried to guilt-trip me, a classic Claire, as she brought up the years we'd spent together, the good times, as though they could erase everything else. "We can fix this," she said, her voice cracking. "We can work through it." "No, we can't," I said, cutting her off. "You don't come back from this. Sign the papers, Claire, or don't. It doesn't matter. We're done." Then I hung up before she could say another word. There was nothing left to discuss. Next, it was James's turn. Getting him fired from his comfortable job was a start, but it wasn't enough. He'd coasted through life on charm and manipulation, but I was determined to make sure no one in his professional network trusted him again. I reached out to a few connections, people who knew James but weren't loyal to him, and laid out the truth. I didn't exaggerate or embellish. I just told them what he'd done. The affair, the stolen money, the betrayal. I even shared some of the evidence Mark had gathered. Word spread fast. Soon James was trying to land interviews, but no one wanted to hire someone who'd betray his own brother. A week later, James called me. It was the first time I'd heard from him since confronting him in his apartment. His voice was frantic, a mix of anger and desperation. "I can't get a job," he yelled, his voice rising. "You've ruined my reputation." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words hang in the air. "No, James, you ruined your reputation. I just made sure people knew the truth." "Come on, man," he pleaded. "We're family." That word family lit a fire inside me. "You don't get to use that word," I snapped. "You stopped being family the second you decided to stab me in the back." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his tone shifting to pathetic. "I was stupid. I made a mistake." "A mistake is locking your keys in the car," I shouted. "What you did was calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're paying for it. Don't call me again, James. We're done." I hung up and blocked his number. Whatever happened to him after that wasn't my concern. But dealing with them wasn't enough. I needed to rebuild. For too long, I'd let Claire's deceit and James's betrayal consume me. That chapter was over. I hit the gym harder than ever. Every lift, every run, every drop of sweat felt like reclaiming my life. I threw myself into work, tackling projects I'd been putting off for months. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, people I'd lost touch with because I'd been too wrapped up in Claire's drama. It wasn't just about staying busy, it was about proving to myself that I could move forward, that I could be better, sharper, stronger. James slunk into the shadows too. Last I heard, he'd moved out of town, likely trying to escape the mess he'd created. Good. Let him run. Let him try to start over somewhere else. I didn't care. To me, they were ghosts now. As for Victor Kane, he wasn't done with them. Mark found out that Victor was pressuring James and Claire for more money after the accounts were frozen. Victor doesn't just let people walk away, Mark explained. He'll squeeze them dry before cutting them loose. Part of me considered warning them, but I stopped myself. They'd made their choice to work with Victor. They'd chosen to betray me. If he turned on them, that was their problem, not mine. Still, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction at the thought of them scrambling to clean up the chaos they'd caused. Looking back, it's hard to put into words how much this experience changed me. I don't trust as easily anymore, but I see that as a strength, not a weakness. Trust isn't something you give away freely. It has to be earned. And loyalty, it's not optional. It's a requirement. Claire and James thought they could destroy me, but all they managed to do was remind me of my true strength. Now here I am, sharper, tougher, and wiser. They tried to break me, but instead they fueled a fire inside me. If there's one thing this ordeal taught me, it's that you can lose everything, but as long as you hold on to yourself, you can rebuild. And I'll be damned if I ever let anyone try to take me down again. That said, I'm a little curious about how their lives will turn out after the disaster they left behind. If I find out anything new, I'll be sure to share the details here, so stay tuned. Now let's get to the last update. Final update. Hey everyone, it's been a while. A lot has happened since my last post, and I figured it was time to fill you in. The financial fallout for my brother James didn't end with the frozen account. Remember that secret stash of stolen money Claire and James tried to set up? Well, the bank flagged the transactions, and since they were linked to fraudulent activity, both of them were hit with massive fines. Claire somehow managed to scrape together enough to cover her share, likely by selling everything she could, but James wasn't so lucky. From what I've heard, he's been struggling to make the payments and is now dealing with relentless debt collectors. The irony isn't lost on me. He tried to take what wasn't his, and now he's drowning in bills he can't afford to pay. Oh, and here's the kicker. I recently learned through mutual contacts that James has officially left town. Apparently he couldn't handle the humiliation of what he'd done and decided to start over somewhere else. Honestly, I think it's for the best. He burned every bridge, professionally, personally, and within our family. The funny thing is, even though he's gone, his reputation is still haunting him. People talk, and his actions have turned into the kind of story that spreads like wildfire. Wherever he goes, he's going to carry the burden of his decisions. If you'd asked me a few months ago how I felt about James, I would have told you I hated him. But now, I feel nothing. He's irrelevant to me. I don't need revenge, closure, or anything like that. I've moved on, and I've built a life where he no longer has any influence. That's the beauty of karma. It doesn't need interference. It works on its own. All I had to do was step aside and let it take care of the rest.